Hi, I'm Tobin Woolford. I'm part of the family that own Flinders Island in South Australia, and we also have our abalone business, Eyrewoolf Abalone, that's based out of Streaky Bay, Flinders Island, and the Eyre Peninsula. We've owned Flinders Island now for over 40 years, and during that time, we've also started a company called Eyrewoolf Abalone, which is a mixture of the name comes about because of the Eyre Peninsula, where we're from, and the Woolford family, which is our family. My father started abalone diving from Flinders Island in the early 80s after he purchased the island and saw boats working around the island and thought he was an avid recreational diver and thought that looked like it could be a good side project from the farming.
Okay.
So since then, my brother and myself have been diving now for over 20 years, and also part of the family business on Flinders Island, which is sheep farming and also tourism. So I was apparently only a few weeks old when my mother and father packed up from their farm in Tumby Bay on the Eyre Peninsula and moved out to Flinders Island. So it would have been a testing times, I assume, for my mum with a 2-year-old, my older brother, and myself as a baby, and left civilization pretty much to be the sole occupants of the island back then. Um, yeah, the only visitors we really had were there was a lobster fisherman, obviously the abalone divers. Um, we had a few people drop in, like we get pilot. There's an airstrip out there, so pilots occasionally drop in trying to get their hours up or travelling around Australia. Um, but other than that, we were the sole occupants on the sheep station there. Yeah, so growing up there, well, as you can imagine, it's one big playground. One of the great things I remember of growing up out there, exploring around the coastal areas. There was rock pools, a lot of swimming, diving, surfing when we were younger, a lot of harvesting our own seafood out there. We also had, when we lived there, we had all, great gardens and everything growing, but harvesting the seafood was also a good one, exploring on the land. One great fact is that we've got no snakes out there. So as a kid, that's great to be able to trample through any of the scrubland and anywhere without the fear of snakes, without mum having to worry about us.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, on land, we had a lot of access, learnt to drive young, ride motorbikes around the farm, help dad, try and get out in the boat whenever we could with him. So yeah, growing up there was great, and now going back to the island now is just as much fun. I go out there quite a bit with my children now. My oldest is 13, youngest 6. We have 3 children, and yeah, they're doing the same things now, learning to dive. Both my eldest 2 daughters got harvested their first abalone this year in April. So yeah, that was amazing for them. It's good fun. In a boat, it can be as little as in our abalone boat, which is a reasonably powerful sort of boat to get to work. We can do it in about 35 minutes, but a normal boat's probably about an hour, 45 minutes or something like that. Plane is only about 20 minutes from Elliston, 15 to 20 minutes. These days we get a few recreational boats come out there fishing, but mainly in the summer months, obviously, the nicer days. Remoteness, yeah, we didn't get a lot of people besides the professional fishermen dropping in and the people coming out there to holiday. Other than that, it was reasonably remote. We'd have a mail plane come out I think it was once a fortnight, or Dad would take the abalone back in when he was working out there and pick up anything we needed. Yeah, so we had one family live out there with us for a few years who was an abalone diver, and yeah, that's where he moved out there, and Dad sort of did a bit of work for him as well, and then decided that he'd acquire his own license. So yeah, so that was back in the early 80s for a couple of years. So generally, in a normal day of harvesting, we day trip each day. We get that back to the fish factory to be weighed off and processed each day. We would spend most of the day out on the water diving, we spend probably average around 5 to 6 hours a day underwater. So yeah, some people find that pretty hard to believe, but yeah, that's where we live and spend most of our time during the days. Obviously, we're not too deep there because of the risk of decompression sickness. So it varies on the swell each day as to whether we work or how long we can spend in the water. Then once we get to taste the abalone, so we produce ourselves two main forms of the abalone, which is one is our process form, which is the canned abalone and retort pouch, or the frozen. Now we'll be tasting both of the forms of abalone on Flinders Island. We'll taste the fresh, which will be fresh or frozen, and we'll cut that up and sear that, or try it sashimi for those that like sashimi. With both of them, all of our abalone, the canned, retort pouch, and our frozen is all sashimi grade. And we'll also be trying our canned abalone. Now, canned abalone is probably something that's quite underrated for a lot of people. They find it hard to believe that it is actually canned. And so it's basically salt, water, and abalone. This is what's in the can, and it's heat sterilised, so it can be eaten direct from the can, and people can heat it up, use it in stir fries, cook it for longer if they wish. So we'll be trying that, both seared and sashimi as well. Both of them, they'll bring out they're probably a bit more tender, the canned abalone, because it has been cooked for a while, and it'll bring out a silky sort of oceanic sort of flavour, sort of a bit of a buttery finish. The seared is probably a bit of a we get a bit more of the cooked sort of pork and scallop notes through that, and yeah, so both of them, and there's a bit more chew in the or it's more of a springy chew, more texture of a squid maybe, that you'll probably feel through the frozen or chilled abalone. We don't have a processing facility on the island. They're actually processed in Streaky Bay, which is where we spend, that's where we live, in Streaky Bay, and we commute to Flinders Island on a regular basis. It's more for schooling for the children and those sort of things that we live in Streaky Bay. Yeah, so the project is a 3-year project that we're about to embark on with the state and federal government, state South Australian government and the federal government. Been lucky enough to be chosen as a safe haven for threatened and endangered mammals that have been threatened by the recent bushfires, habitat loss and urban sprawl. So what we need to do, we've unfortunately had some feral animals enter the island over the years. One, the black rat, came onto Flinders Island back in 1942 on the wreck of Kapara, coal steamship, and in their wisdom back in the day, they brought some domestic cats out to get rid of the rats, and unfortunately both of those got onto the island and have been there ever since. So now we need to eradicate those, and then we'll be reintroducing some threatened mammals, and also give the native bird life a huge boost and a lot. Hopefully we can bring some numbers back there. There are still numbers of some great water birds to see. We've got a pair of ospreys, sea eagles. There's hooded plovers out there. We get Cape Barren geese, shearwaters. There's quite a few birds out there, but just to give them that extra boost, I'm sure it'll help not having the cats on there. And so there's a few natives that are on the mainland that they're looking to reintroduce out there or introduce out there, but they have to be rodent or feral free for 12 months with no evidence before we can do that. So hopefully in 3 years' time, we can start reintroducing some of these animals from the mainland. We have one tourist house out there that can handle probably 10, I think it's 12 people. Other than that, it's pretty relatively human impact free, besides our family and we've destocked our sheep down to, we only have a few hundred out there now. we're thinking even then we may still be able to utilise having stock out there, because can become a fire danger with the grasses if I don't think any of the mammals they're looking to reintroduce are high grazing. So unless we can create some really good fire breaks, we'll probably still have some stock out there. And that sort of works well with the tourism as well, because we've got a pretty historic shearing shed out there. It's an old stone shearing shed that some of the earliest dates we can find there back in the 1920s. So yeah, so it's be good to keep that going in a smaller capacity than what we have.
Yeah.
Over the years when we lived out there and Dad was right into his sheep farming, well, I think we're up to 4,000 to 6,000 sheep at times, which is a big change to now. In Bryant's Bay, where the shipwreck is, that was actually some of the earliest evidence of human intervention on the island. There's some old sealing ruins there. So there were sealers out there, or coincidentally, it was Bryant was the surname of the sealer that lived out there. I think he was out there for maybe 15 years sealing, lived a pretty solitary life out there, but I think he made quite a bit of money by the way the stories go back in those days. And then there was some whaling out there in a smaller capacity of the southern right whales in the 1840s, I believe. Before the Kapara and even Bryant, possibly, there was a whaling or sealing ship. Sorry, the name's just escaped me now, but that was wrecked in the early days on the southwestern side, the Vulcan. And yeah, the crew of the Vulcan actually lived out there for, I believe it was 3 to 4 weeks, and actually built another ship that was in the early 1800s, built a boat to actually sail back to Coffin Bay. They tried to sail to Port Adelaide and ended up in Coffin Bay to get off the island back in the early 1800s. Since then, I think there was cropping on the island. There was 2 titles on the island. There's been fertilizer, like as in guano, mined out there from the bats in the caves. So there was quite a few industries out there. I believe I've heard there's been up to 40 people live on the island at once. But since the shipping slowed down, the shipping lanes around Australia, that sort of made it a bit more unviable to get the produce off the island. So since the 70s, I think it's pretty much just been sheep. And we've only used it for wool. So we sort of have merino sheep, and it's mainly for wool. We don't sell any for meat. It's just too hard to get them off the island, really. We do it for the first probably 7 months of the year, and then they'll spawn. So we leave them alone when they spawn. So basically we'll be those last 5 months we can do other things, which is when we spend a bit of time out at Flinders Island and stuff. But this first 7 months we're sort of dictated by the weather. Yep. So our industry's managed with our sizes. We have a legal minimum size. Both of them are black lip and green lip, and they're both set up at what we call maturity +4 for black lip, maturity +5 for green lip. So an average reproduction size of an abalone is 90 millimeters. We don't harvest them until 130 and 145 millimeters. So they'll get 4 to 5 years of spawning before we can take them. And the market, especially for the green lip, prefer the larger one. So a lot of our abalone are up to 10 years old before we take them. So it's a very well looked after industry. And the sizes, they vary quite a bit. But because we're meat weight, that's why we fish our green lip, especially in autumn, because they don't bleed as much and lose weight as we shuck them. They'll lose weight there. Where the black lip, they're a bit more erratic with their spawning. They'll do partial spawnings during the year, but both the green lip and the black lip in September will do a major spawning, and then they lose a lot of condition then. So we'll leave them alone there. No, it's not very widely known, but it's a pretty underrated food, I think. It's the health benefits for it, with your omega-3s, and there's basically for a shellfish, it's quite amazing that there's pretty much no cholesterol in abalone. The canned stuff that we're producing now, we've worked out how to produce the cans without a preservative. Most of the companies use a colour retention agent in there, same as what they use in wine. But we're actually developing cans now that we can do it without this. So we're bringing them to market this year. Actually, we've done some trials, and now we're just bringing them to market from this year's stock. So that's quite exciting. We're setting up an e-commerce site and going to start moving those cans this year. I have some of so some of the shells here. See, so what we do, this is the black lip and the green lip. So what we'll actually do is we'll clean these up and wash these, and this is how we'll actually serve the abalone. So you'll get the different tastings on there, so then people can take them and actually take it home once they've had their tasting.